I do like to read.
Sometimes, if it's a good book.
Sometimes.
I do.
Yeah, sometimes.
I only like to read during book reports.
No, not so much. I like to write, not read.
Yeah, I do.
Kind of.
No.
I really don't read that much.
I read a couple books.
I mostly like the newspapers and stuff.
I like to read, yeah. Not really. I'm really bad at it. I'm not gonna lie.
I love to read, and I just finished a book by Tom Clancy called Rainbow Six. That was like a fun read. And then in school, we read a bunch of like literary masterpieces like Jane Eyre.
I love to read. I'm like the biggest dork ever when it comes to reading.
Jess, I think we're supposed to be starting now.
Just one sec, Matt. I want to finish this chapter.
Okay.
I just can't. This book is so good. It's Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. It's absolutely fantastic. It has like plot twists and nothing you would ever expect. But you know, obviously I didn't start out reading books this difficult. I started out just when I was a little kid. Every night my parents would read me a book. You know, we started out with If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. It's a really simple book. It goes on. You know, if you give a mouse a cookie, he'll want a glass of milk. It just keeps going like that. And it's just such a cute story, you know? And it really helped me build my foundation for reading.
Mm-hmm. Well, my favorite book when I was little was Green Eggs and Ham. It was like one of my first ever books, and I loved it just because it's always like rhyming and green eggs and ham, like, come on now. That was just like funny when you're little, you know? And then I was just reading Goosebumps because it was one of my first chapter books, and I love to read them now still too.
Reading is an activity that can be both enjoyable and enlightening.
It can be a personal escape or a shared experience.
To open up a book is to open the door to new opportunities, ideas, and relationships.
Reading is an excellent way to explore the furthest depths of our imagination.
But can it also help to explore our faith in God?
The joy of reading. That's what we'll be talking about today. Hi everyone, I'm Matt.
And I'm Jess.
And this is Realfaith TV.
The teens on the street all share different views on reading, some loving it, while others not so much.
We'll talk with them a little later in the show, as well as meet our spotlight guest, avid reader, and past host for Realfaith TV, Jack.
But first, let's meet our studio guests and see if they find reading enjoyable.
Okay, they are Joelle, Vince, Matt, Leah, Chris, and Danielle.
Okay, so do you read for fun or only when it's required?
I do read when it's required, obviously, but I like to read for fun.
I used to read a lot when I was younger, like 7 and 8, but now I usually only read when it's required.
Yeah, me too. I usually read when it's required, but that's a bad habit. I know I should try reading more often.
Well, I'm like the complete opposite. I love reading for fun, and I really can't stand it when I have to read like a book report. So it's just like, I had to read To Kill a Mockingbird just recently, and I thought, oh, this is gonna be such a boring book because it was like assigned by the school. But I ended up really liking it, and now it's one of my favorite books.
I have a lot of downtime, like, 'cause I do like plays and I'm in theater. So when I'm not on stage, I always bring a book, 'cause like you're not allowed to talk or whatever. So I read then, and it's fun.
I definitely read for fun. I always love reading books, and I always have since I was a little girl.
I used to always read. In 8th grade, that's all I did. And then high school came around, and all of a sudden I didn't have time anymore.
I'm with you. I wish I had more time. I love reading.
Our spotlight guest, Jack, has read over 1,500 books since he first learned to read at age 6.
He'll share with us why he likes to read so much.
And how he helped a friend who was once opposed to reading develop a more immediate interest.
I guess ask me why I like to read is the same thing as ask me why I like to eat or why I like to breathe, why I like to sleep, you know. Reading's always been an essential part of my life. The day I learned to read was just the day it kind of just possessed me. People would make fun of my mom because she was the only mother who had to yell at her kid to stop reading. She'd throw me outside to get some fresh air, so I'd walk into the garage and sit in the corner and read a book. That's what I like about books, that you have personal experience with them. This experience that's yours and yours alone, because you can read the same book and they all have a different image of what's going on in there. It challenges your creativity. It challenges you to kind of create an image in your mind of what's going on, what these people look like. I have a lot of friends who hate to read, who just don't like reading at all. Like, for example, one of my friends throughout grade school never read a book. Even for school, he'd say, I'm not gonna read it. So finally I made him read this book, Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, which is one of my all-time favorite books. And it's about these kids who are being trained to be generals and everything. It's in the future, and they take them to this space station and train them at battle school. They take them when they're like 6. They're like these child geniuses. He wanted to be in the military, he loved all that kind of stuff, and I thought he would love this book, so I gave him the book. He just devoured it. He finished it in like 2 days. There's a bunch of other books in the series, so he read all of them, and now he doesn't read a lot, but he does occasionally pick up a book and read. Even if you can get someone to do that, that's important, because even if you don't read a lot, you have to read something. You have to stimulate your mind with some kind of book, any kind of book. You know, at some point, people need that. You know, it's food for the soul.
I love that. Reading is food for the soul. It's so true because you can learn so much from reading. There are like life lessons in books that you can take away, and it can really make you a better person. So, what are some of your guys' favorite books and why?
The Little Prince is one of my favorite books. I had to read it last year for summer reading, and to be truthful, I picked it because it's really short. It's under 100 pages. But now I kind of like it for that reason, because anytime I want to, if I have downtime or anything, I can just read it in an hour. And it has such like a good meaning behind it.
I really like The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, because it's about this guy, and he had just passed away, and before he actually gets to heaven, he meets 5 different people. And it shows you that you don't have to actually meet someone in your life for them to have an impact on you. They talk about this man that he had never met in his life that he ends up meeting on the way to heaven, and he actually had a big impact on the other man's life, and he didn't even know it.
I brought Big Resume. It's about Tim Resser and his relationship with his father, and how his father taught him so many virtues that he can apply to his life now, and I thought that's really important because some of them apply to me.
My favorite book when I was in 3rd and 4th grade was Captain Underpants, because it was just so wacky and it was crazy. They made up words. They would pretty much just capture the imagination of anybody, and even though it wouldn't pertain to the plot at all, they would have anything and everything in the book, and it was just hilarious.
One of my favorite books is the Harry Potter series because they're so imaginative and they can be made for adults or kids. It's really about a boy who has no parents, and he's really searching for his meaning in life, and through that he finds a lot out about himself.
I do like books that apply to broader audiences. Similar to Leah, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn was a book that I had to read for a summer assignment, and unfortunately I wasn't able to choose my books. But this book, once I read it, like Jack says, I devoured it. It was so meaningful to me. I cried after reading this book, and it impacted my life so much. This girl going through this life with her family, and unfortunately, you know, things with her father passing and things like that. I haven't had tragedy in my life like that, but I related so much to her story, and I took it in and I felt it, and it changed my life reading this book.
Next, let's go back to the teens on the street and find out what books they've read.
I read The Vow. That's the last book I read. It's about these 3 women who make a vow on New Year's to be married by the next year.
The last book I read was The Night.
Zach's Life.
The Child called it.
Of Mice and Men.
Of Mice and Men.
Macbeth.
The book was called Hard Times, and I read it about a week ago.
Last year in high school, I read Lord of the Flies.
Angela's Ashes.
Then This Is Now.
I'm actually reading a book right now, and it's called Double Identity.
I just finished Shakespeare, an analysis of Shakespeare Hamlet, and I loved it.
Self-Reliance by Emerson.
I don't remember what it was called, but the one I was just reading is Smack by Melvin Burgess.
Favorite book is Dr. Seuss because he got a lot of fun stories.
I'm a lot of fun.
When I was little, I used to like Encyclopedia Brown.
Probably Stuart Little. It was a very entertaining book, and it got me to read the whole thing.
Goosebumps. That Tupac book, that poetry book he had, because like I'm into poetry and stuff.
I really like Number the Stars, or I really like A Child Called It. Crank. It was by Ellen Hopkins, I think. It was really good. It was life-changing, kind of. Snack, the book I'm reading. I've read it like 20 times.
Probably The Catcher in the Rye.
That is my favorite book too. I love that book.
Of Mice and Men. That was one of my favorite books I've read of all time.
I really like John Grisham, The Pelican Brief.
Mysterious books or books that having to deal with God.
That last book I just read, Blessed Are the Poor in Spirit by Mark Hart.
My favorite book, probably the Bible.
You know, my favorite book, like one girl said she loved series, and I just love series of all kinds of books. I love Harry Potter, like Danielle said, but I also loved a series of Unfortunate Events. It was just like, when I was younger, it was like teaching me new words, and every time they used a big word, one of the main characters would explain what it meant and everything and how you can use it in a sentence. And I just thought it was kind of cool because it expanded my vocabulary.
I just read The Kite Runner recently. I just finished it, and I could not put it down. It was fantastic, and it's just one of those books that really makes you think. Like, I read a certain section, and I was like up in the middle of the night just like thinking about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. Like, this is really happening too. So it was kind of wake-up call for me. It's a really good book.
Next, Jack will share with us some of his favorite books.
And how reading motivated him to get involved with a cause he might have otherwise ignored.
I read everything, absolutely everything. I've read histories, biographies, autobiographies, fantasy, mystery, historical fiction, regular fiction. But right after I read Lord of the Rings in 2nd grade, I went on this big Stephen King kick. And I just read everything Stephen King ever wrote. And I still, every time he puts out a book, I read it right away. Like a Stephen King book, I'll read that, one light on in my house. I'm alone, I'm reading Salem's Lot and thinking there's vampires coming up the driveway. And if you get into a book like that and you scare yourself silly, I love that feeling. Because of that, horror will always hold a special place in my heart. I love when a book can reach out and touch your life in like the real physical world, not the world on the page. So I guess there's a couple books that I liked more than others. Dostoevsky is really good. I liked The Brothers Karamazov and Crime and Punishment. Kurt Vonnegut is another author I really, really like. Slaughterhouse-Five is one of my all-time favorite books. I love reading Vonnegut, and I loved Heller, Catch-22, because they made you laugh out loud, and at the same time they taught you something. They taught you why you were laughing, or like what that laugh meant. I read this book, Ishmael, by Daniel Quinn. It's kind of like an environmentalist book. It's about how society is kind of polluting the earth, hurting the land and everything. That book really affected me and made me take a stronger stance on environmentalism and all that kind of stuff, and I've become a lot more active since reading that book.
I really liked how he said that some books can like scare you to the point where you stay up all night. You can imagine something and put it into your own perspective, and it kind of ends up like a TV show or a movie, and I just love how that like plays out in your head. Has a book ever made you pursue something you normally wouldn't have?
Well, after reading The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, I realized that you can still be friends with someone even if you're not around them all the time. And I'm actually still really good friends with this kid that I met 2 years ago, and I haven't really seen him since. But we like write letters to each other and call each other on the phone and through Facebook and stuff. And it just makes me happy that we can stay friends. And I wouldn't have thought to stay friends with him if I hadn't read that book.
I read this book called Stargirl once, and it's about being different because this girl was really different than everyone else. She was really weird, and it just encouraged me to be different from everyone else.
I read a book, it's called A Long Way Gone. It's by Ishmael Bia, and it's his story. It tells the story of, Uganda and all the problems that are going on over there, like with the war and the children soldiers and stuff. And it really motivated me to get involved in that cause. And I really, I want to go to Uganda someday, and I want to help people there.
In school this year, we had to read The Odyssey by Homer. The reason Homer wrote it was so the Greeks could see how an ideal Greek would act. And I didn't really grasp the concept as well as my friend did, because after reading it, he really strived to be the best he could be.
Actually, a few summers ago, I had the summer reading assignment of these two books right here, Downsiders and Izzy Willy Nilly. Once again, I didn't actually want to read them, but in Izzy Willy Nilly, the girl is injured and unable to use her legs, and I looked at her experience in that, and it brought a new light to my mind of how to act around people with disabilities and differences. And with Downsiders, it was a whole outcasted group of people, a whole group of social pariahs. And it gave me a new perspective on how to treat people that have different standards and that act differently and that are different.
The November 2007 report, To Read or Not to Read, by the National Endowment for the Arts states that
nearly half of all Americans aged 18 to 24 read no books in their spare time.
And American families are spending less on books than at almost any other time in the past 2 decades.
There's no doubt that time spent on the internet, playing video games, and watching TV has contributed to the decline of leisurely reading.
But in an age where everything literary is turned into a movie or miniseries, why should it matter?
Is it still important to be well-read?
That's what we ask the teens on the street.
Let's check it out.
How important do you think it is to be well-read? Explain.
Well-read. I think it actually is pretty important because you're always gonna have random questions coming up to you, and you're gonna need some responses, like stuff like this happening.
I think it's very important to be well-read.
It furthers their education and using proper grammar in English.
If you're well-read, you know a lot.
If you're not well-read, you just don't have a good connection with anybody.
I don't think it's that important. It depends on who you are.
But read, you learn some things in books that you never learned before.
You can have more open mind and more imagination.
The more you read, the smarter you are,
You gain a lot,
Reading just, expands your mind.
Reading is knowledge, and knowledge is power. It expands your mind.
I really think that reading can expand your mind. Like the one girl said there, it opens your mind to more possibilities. Like how me and Vince, we don't like reading books because we have to. But when you really do, sometimes you really enjoy that book and it kind of opens your mind to dare to pick up a book you normally wouldn't read.
Reading is most definitely the way to get new words into your vocabulary. When you take up a book and it has a whole bunch of words you don't know, if you don't understand it through context, then you look it up so you can understand the book. Another thing is I think it's important to keep reading and writing in the activities of people because, for instance, with computers nowadays, even things like cursive writing is leaving. Reading and things like that kind of practice keeps people's minds fresh to the things that we've been doing for years and years and years.
I definitely agree with you. Like the guy said on the Teen on the Street, reading is knowledge and knowledge is power. The more you read, the more knowledge you gain, and it helps to expand your mind. Instead of just sitting in front of the television and just letting that soak into your brain, reading, you actually can picture things and imagine them in your head for yourself.
It makes you think and it keeps your thoughts flowing.
But I also think it's important because it expands your creativity and your imagination, and it could also help you in a lifelong situation. You could go back to that book and say that character, that's what happened, and I'm gonna try to do what that character did and see what happens.
And you hear it a million times, but reading always does keep you educated. Whether it's keeping up with the news or reading a book, it just keeps you educated.
Next, Jack talks to us about how reading has given him a firm foundation from which to teach others.
And gives advice for those who dismiss reading altogether.
I tutor for the SATs now, help kids out with that. I have this foundation that reading has given me that I can then try and impart to others. I want to try my hand at teaching because I love books so much. I get so much out of them. I want to be able to take that and give it to others. The more you read, the better you get at it. It's a skill like anything else. You shouldn't think that, it takes me too long to read a book. In school, there's always, read this by Tuesday, read this by Thursday. You gotta read chapters 1 through 7 by Friday. It puts pressure on you and you kind of go, I can't do this. What you have to remember is everyone reads at their own pace, and that when you're reading on your own, there's no deadlines. You can take as long as you want with a book. Some people read 2 books at once. Some people read 1 book a year. People should go out and try and discover, what kind of books they like. There's books for every kind of person out there. There are millions of books. If you can't find a book you like, you're just not looking hard enough. You kind of have to take a step back, think about what interests you, what gets you going, and then find a book about that or similar to that or with themes that are that relate to that.
Books can open up realities never thought possible.
They enable us to connect with characters and situations outside of space and time,
allowing us to experience places and periods through the use of our imagination.
As creator of all things, God graced us with the spiritual gift of creativity,
for use in both the physical world and for the realm of our imagination.
That's why stories, both spoken and written, are such powerful teaching tools.
They reach us in ways our ordinary human senses cannot.
Jesus knew this. Through the gospel texts, his stories have attracted followers for over 2,000 years.
And continue to inspire people to this very day.
Next, we asked the teens on the street if any books inspired them in their faith journey.
Let's hear what they had to say.
The Peyton Sky Theory series, it's about this girl going up through it takes you from her high school to her college years, and it talks about her struggle between being a Christian and also trying to be a teenager and going through different types of relationships and sex and not having it. Also there's this series about this girl named Elise that I used to read when I was little about all the stuff she went through and how she always remained like strong in her faith.
Soul Surfer by Bethany Hamilton. That was the girl in Hawaii who got her arm bitten off by the shark, and she still continues to surf.
Blessed are the poor in spirit. It showed me like throughout some trials that in my life, I'm always have someone to turn to, God.
I guess you could go back to Stuart Little because he goes down the drain, but instead of giving up, he just, he did everything he could to get back.
Angela Ashes says, you only live once, so live it up to the fullest.
The Bible really has.
Definitely Long Day's Journey into Night by Eugene O'Neill, just because it sort of reminded me of like my family or what my family could be if I didn't have more faith, because they really fell apart, and I think that if you have more faith you could really be stronger together in a familial unit.
I read a lot of short stories in religion class and everything, and those usually inspire me and help me to apply them to my life.
Recently I read some books by Emerson, and it was self-reliance, nature, teach you about humanity.
A Child Called It really taught me a lot. That I don't know, it just really hit me.
The Bible, I guess.
One character in this book, he loves another, it's a flower, but he loves it unconditionally. And that kind of reminded me of how Jesus loves me. And the flower in the book doesn't really appreciate the other character. And sometimes I feel like that's how I am with Jesus. And after I read it, I felt like I wanted to change that, and I wanted to appreciate Jesus more.
There's a book called The Alchemist, and it's about this boy, Santiago, who travels looking for a treasure, but then the story ends up when the treasure's right in front of him. He just didn't realize that life's a treasure and that we should take it preciously and live the most.
Like the girl said on the Teen on the Street, the book, A Child Called It, I also read that. It's about this boy, and he was abused by his parents when he was much younger. And he used to look to his dad for help because his mom was really the one abusing him. And that kind of reminds me, like Leah said, of how we are with Jesus, how we look to Jesus for help to get us through tough situations.
A book I've read, 1,000 Splendid Suns. It's at one point everything is going bad for the main character, and then something good pops up. And this line that stuck out to me is, if it's God's will, we have to give into it. And it just really stuck out to me because she's going through the worst of times, and when you say something like that, it really just spoke to me.
The Christian Bible, in its various translations, is often regarded as the #1 best-selling book of all time.
In the US alone, it sells over 25 million copies every year.
It continues to be printed in every country and in every language.
Read by more people and referenced by more authors than any other piece of literature.
The Bible's influence in the world is impossible to ignore.
The Bible speaks to our souls with moral instruction, history, and through parable.
Finally, Jack talks with us about why the Bible is so influential.
And how reading in general helps him to grow in his faith.
Books help me grow in my faith because they give me understanding of the world, understanding of human motives, understanding of myself. When you get this understanding, you start to appreciate more and more God's creation, the world, myself, these complex emotions that are found throughout the interchanges and exchanges between people. You start to appreciate the complexities of the world more. And there's some books that they kind of touch you, in a way that, if you go visit the Grand Canyon, you'll look down, and you see how beautiful that is, and you say, wow, there must be a God. There's all sorts of new symbolism that relates to Christianity that's found throughout, the canon of Western literature. Take The Grapes of Wrath, for instance, by Steinbeck. The character in that, he's a Christ-like figure. He goes through kind of the same trials and travails as Christ did, and you find that in a lot of literature. Some people would even argue that Gatsby, from The Great Gatsby, there's Christian symbolism there, because people write about what they know. For a lot of people, Christianity and Catholicism is a big part of their lives, so they take that and they put it into their books. It's hard to find a book without any sort of religious reference, whether it's overt or it's between the words there. There's a very spiritually significant book that you can get a lot out of, and it's kind of food for the soul, reading the Bible. But it's It's a good read. It's so filled with imagery and metaphors and themes and everything, and it's just, there's so much you can get out of there.
The Bible, it's such a source of inspiration, and people are sometimes intimidated by that, and it can really help you build your faith.
I think books in general have great lessons that you can learn. Grasping morals from any book in general just brings so much to a person, and taking all those lessons and morals together can just make you grow as a person.
Just like the familiar saying, the pen is mightier than the sword.
Books can have tremendous power.
So much power that in some parts of the world, governments prohibit the influx of literature they deem threatening.
This includes the Holy Bible.
Reading should never be taken for granted, and it can be cultivated one story at a time.
Like Jack said, discover what it is that interests you.
And you will no doubt find a whole world of books to sink your teeth into.
So have you read any good books lately?
We'd love to hear about it. Contact us through our website.
The address is www.realfaithtv.com.
Or you can call us at 609-406-7402.
And we'll leave you today with this passage from Revelation chapter 1.
Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of the prophecy.
And blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written in it.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time on
Real Faith TV. God bless.